Hello and welcome to the Court Case Podcast with me, your host, James Court.
And me, your co-host, Sweet Tea.
You wouldn't know it from the news, but the Ukraine war is still ongoing. And today, we're going to be talking to Thomas Duncan Bell, a man that crossed the Polish border and has helped bring people out. It's a really interesting conversation, and it's all happening right after this. Okay, so hey Tom, how are you doing today?
I'm not too bad, thank you. How about yourself?
Oh, good. We're doing great. We're really excited to get into this conversation. So you live in Poland, Tom. We're visiting Poland at Christmas. Could you tell us a little bit about what that's like?
To be honest, it's got a long way to go from a political perspective, and but I would say that it's definitely a place that I don't want to move back from. I live at the bottom of a mountain in a very small village. So when you come out of a London environment after sort of 18 years of burning the candle at both ends, you see, green fields and trees every day, and you're in a place of solace. You certainly start to question why you wasted so much time.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's good. Have you seen any of like the main sites that there are to see in Poland?
It's strange, actually. I think when I was in London, I never even went to see most of the sites in London, right?
Yeah.
And so you kind of do organically over time.
Yeah.
But it's kind of the same in Poland. I moved here and I didn't seek out specific sites that I wanted to go and see.
Yeah.
I just kind of started living and up in the mountains and this kind of thing. So to be honest, no, I don't know if that makes me a Philistine or not, to be honest.
No, well, at least you're consistent. If you don't do it wherever you live.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm definitely one of those people where if there are hordes of people clamoring to get to a place, I'm not really bothered.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in going to the places that no one else has been.
The unique places
that, less people frequent, to be honest.
Yeah, I can understand that. So what made you decide to volunteer as a first responder and get medical supplies over the Polish border to Ukraine?
Initially what happened was I had a friend, so I ran quite a successful dog product company randomly. And so when you're selling dog products and you're, a guy who likes to get after it, you kind of get into like dog training and random things like that. And so along the way of running that business, I learned how to train police and military dogs.
Okay.
Put on attack suits and all this kind of stuff. And that eventually led me to Ukraine, where I was training police and military dogs and border defense dogs in Ukraine for a number of years. And so I have a lot of friends across Ukraine. And at the start of the conflict back in February, on February the 26th, a close friend of mine was shot to death, and with his father and his dogs. And there was a video that went around online where it was kind of like a spliced video where part of it was him recording what was happening to them as they were being fired upon.
Jesus.
And then the second part of the video was the aftermath of someone else coming and recording their bodies in a ditch, the dog's dead, this kind of thing. And so it was a really visceral way to sort of see your friend killed and then kind of have to live through the trauma of that experience in a way visually. Yeah. And I think in the UK, we're very sheltered from war and this type of thing. You think of when we're younger, like kind of Lebanon, Bosnia, these kind of things, you can just change the channel. You're on an island, nothing's going to come to you, no problems will occur. So it's easy to shut your windows and doors and not pay attention. And here, where I live now, is about 6 hours from the border of Ukraine.
Okay.
So I'm in and out of the UK, but at the same time, this is kind of my life. And I sort of sat here for a week or so afterwards. I wasn't really able to work. And I was just kind of staring out the window. I tried to watch Netflix or something. I was like, anything to kind of just disrupt the thought process, but all you're seeing in your mind is this video again and again, and this like thinking about what your friend's gone through. And
Yeah.
so it got to the point where my wife just said, you know, you're no good to us here. You know, your mind's elsewhere. You're a guy who wants to get after it. You're obviously going to go. You want to go and do something. So go and do it. You know, my grandfather told me when I was a kid, the only thing to stop the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. And so my mindset was really, okay, what skills do I have, and what can I bring to the plate, even in a small way, that's going to aid someone in some way?
Yeah.
You know, and I've done Spartan racing and endurance racing, and I've done all these crazy things all over the world where I've put myself in harm's way just to kind of galvanize who I am as an individual and how robust I am in the context of being mentally resilient. You know, I trained as a rescue diver. I've saved people at sea and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, okay, well, you know, at the very least, I can give medical aid. I can take, you know, medical supplies and things like that to the border and see what they need. And kind of when you get there, immediately your medical supplies are gone, right? It's like you've just given them out and that's it. So I was kind of evacuating. I just got straight into evacuating refugees, you know, women, kids, like elderly. It was manic. It was like 21 hours a day, try and grab a few hours of sleep in the back of a Jeep and then get up and go again. But even as you try and sleep, you might have a moment where you're disturbed and you kind of look out the window and you see hordes of people again trying to get out of this country, and you just can't stop. So that was kind of the catalyst, was my friend's death.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any preconceived notion of what I should be going to do. I just knew that as an able-bodied guy who was more mentally resilient than the average person, I had to go and get stuck in and see where I could help, really.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
You said something just a minute ago about when your friend died, that he was filming some of it. And I've noticed, like, when 9/11 happened, mobile phones were just emerging and Wi-Fi. And if you looked in the darkest places of the internet, you might be able to find like an Al Qaeda beheading video or something. But this seems like the first war where people in the thick of it, people that are dying, are recording and tweeting it on their phones and stuff. What effect do you think that's having?
I think it's, you know, it's certainly more visceral for people. So you really, if you can't fully understand the context of what people are going through, the level of trauma, then you can't fully realize what, you know, we're being challenged with as a global society in a way. So as much as I wouldn't want to watch that video of my friend again, I watched it several times and it will never leave my mind. I think it's one of those things where, you know, I was on a call the other day with someone and she was kind of almost in tears when I was talking to her about this circumstance. And she said, do you think this is the only way to watch something like that? This is the only way to really get it into my head.
Yeah.
You know, what it is that these people are going through. And I think, to be honest, it probably is. But you're still sheltered in the UK, right?
Yeah.
I've seen the aftermath of what's really going on over there. You know, 40 or 50 women lined up in a row and raped and then had a tank run over them. You know, it's extreme.
Jesus.
You know, kids' toys in their houses where the Russians are retreating, being booby-trapped with bombs and explosives, so that when the children refrequent their houses, if it's even possible to do so, they pick up their favourite bear and they die.
Jesus.
It's disgusting. It's an atrocity. And I think I grew up in such a sheltered environment. And as human beings, like, it's, you know, I work in the mental health space, so my job is to train companies how to look after the mental health of their staff.
Yeah.
And our brains are programmed to force us into a state of comfort, right? To get a nice house, to be warm, to be cozy, to eat lots of food, to sleep as often as we can, right? We're not programmed to live in a cave and knock an animal on the head and eat round a fire anymore and this kind of stuff, right? So most people aren't ready for this type of atrocity.
Yeah.
And at this extreme level, it's very difficult to comprehend.
No, that's absolutely right. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. And one thing else I wanted to ask is, obviously you're a British person, you're living in Poland. If you were in the UK at the time, would you still have made the same decision, or was living in Poland a big catalyst of why you went over?
You know, I think I still would have done what I had to do.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, my friend still would have died, and it still would have hurt, and I still would have had to go and do something. From my perspective, the UK is a couple of hours away from Poland. There's no excuse for anybody who's got some skills not to go over and at least help on the border and give out soup or whatever they can do, or clothes. You know, as far as I'm concerned, it just comes down to comfort. Yeah. You know, I had a house fire like several months after I came back from Ukraine, and my house burnt down. And I had friends from the UK ask if I needed help, even just to sift rubble or move stuff into skips or whatever.
Oh, wow.
And I said, yeah, that'd be really appreciated. And every time I said that, they ghosted me. Right. So, and this is friends of mine, right? So if you can imagine a whole society who doesn't know the people of Ukraine, like what is the impetus for them to get up, get their finger out and go and actually make a change? There isn't a lot. But I know people that I was working with, going in and out and doing extractions in Ukraine, who were coming from the UK, who were coming from Ireland, who were coming from America, Canada, France, Germany, all over the place to come and get stuck in. And I think it's just a mindset ultimately.
Yeah, and it's really fantastic and it's admirable.
Yeah, 100%.
To be quite honest with you. And could you describe to us what it was like when you first crossed the border and got into Ukraine? What was it like for you?
I think you know, it was scary. Like, you know, I'm not a military guy, right? I'm just a hard bastard. So I'm not like, you know, I like a bit of a ruck and everything like that, but this is not the kind of thing you ever expect that you're going to have to be able to do. Yeah. And as soon as you cross over the border, you're met with sandbags, military armament all over the place, like the result of bombardment from planes overhead, fires going off, you know. So there's a lot of stuff that's kind of unnerving to the average bloke who's just, you know, going to try and help. Yeah. You know, and from my perspective, you know, my wife said to me, "We've got a 4-year-old, so I know you want to go and do this and you want to go and do something about it, but just don't get yourself killed." Yeah. But when you go over and you start to see some of those things, you think, what is the reality? With each extraction, when I was going into the country, I was trying to time it. You know, I was like, okay, how can I avoid, you know, a military bombardment where they're bombing all night long? How can I get in and get out and try and work my way around these time parameters where the sun drops and then they start to shell everything, you know, and where do I need to be if I'm going to be trapped there during a point like that? Where do I need to go? Where's the most likely place that I can go strategically so that I'm in less danger? Yeah. And I'm not a military operative, right? So I'm just using my flipping guile and my tact as a human being and trying to be adaptable. Yeah. While trying to execute this kind of mission first mentality that I learned through all my kind of years doing this Spartan racing. Yeah. So I think it's not something I'd want anyone to have to kind of experience unnecessarily. But at the same time, I'm kind of glad that I did it. I think you know who you are in those moments. Absolutely. You really understand who you are as an individual if you're willing to take that step. One of the big stories that I've read surrounding you is that you brought a child out of Ukraine to stay with you. What is the child's story and where is he now? So how that came about was I was in a band in Poland with a friend of mine, Andrei, who's a Ukrainian guy. Yeah. and his father is an officer in the Ukrainian military and has been on the front line since the start. And his mother is an operational individual within the fire service in Ukraine.
Right.
So again, operational from day one. And what happened was he went over into Ukraine just before the conflict kicked off. It was just, he was going back to see family for a few days and then coming back because he was working in Poland in the city of Wrocław, which is the lowest major city.
Yeah.
And while he was in there, the war broke out and he was trapped. And so he's about 25 years old. So he wasn't allowed to leave because he was above this 18-year-old threshold.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a younger brother, Max, who was 9.
Oh.
And I'd gone to the border of Ukraine. This was kind of early days, and I just started evacuating people going in and out. And he called me and he said, "Listen, I need to get my younger brother out. You know, can you come in and get him? You know, can you come and try and rescue him because we don't have anyone he can be with?" And he knew that I was in, you know, a lot of the communications for people from Ukraine that weren't kind of closed off was like Facebook messages and all this kind of thing. So he'd seen what I was posting this stuff on Facebook, like, people go and do something about it, you know, do whatever you can as individuals, and here's what I'm off to do, so that people have an account of where I've been. If, you know, anything happens to me, at least, you know, people see what that journey was.
Yeah.
And so he called me and he said, "I need to get my brother out, and will you come in and get him?" And obviously, you know, that was even more close to home because I was like, okay, I've got one friend dead already and I've got another friend in there. His family were just south of Kiev in a place, and I don't know if I'm going to pronounce it correctly, but Kirkazi or something it's called. So it's just south of Kiev down the border of the river. And so very much like in the thick of it, right? They were getting shelled all the time and this kind of stuff.
Jeez.
And so when he said, you know, will you come in and get Max, I thought, you know, there wasn't really a second thought in my mind. It was like, there's a 9-year-old kid and I've got a 4-year-old. And if it was sorry, I'm choking up a bit. It's difficult to sort of kind of relive some of this stuff.
100%.
Of course, yeah.
But I've got a small child, and I thought, you know, if it was my 9-year-old, I'd want him out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's no need for a child to be in a war zone, and it's a disgrace that it happened. So I went to find a border that was easier to access towards where they were. And so I went up to the north of Poland to find a border that was easier to get through. Because the borders I was working at were very intensive. So when you're going in and out, there were so many aid vehicles and all sorts of things. It was such a nightmare. It was so erratic because there wasn't as much support there. And that's specifically why I went to those lower border lines, because there was just not enough military, not enough police, not enough support from, you know, other people outside of Ukraine.
Yeah.
And so I went to one of the more modern borders up north so that I could get in easier. And when I got there, these Polish border guards put me in the back of a vehicle with some other people and said, "Look, listen, leave your vehicle here, go in on foot, and then it's going to be easier because there's a lot of people coming out of this one." Whereas the borders I was at, there was a lot of people going in with food and aid. This one, there was a lot of people coming out. So they said, "Leave your vehicle here with us, with the border guards. And then when you go in and you come back, then it'll be easier for you to get out on foot." Bullshit, right? But I trusted them, and we had to go. So they bundled me in the back of this van, and I went over the border, and I nearly got shot, actually, because I got out of the van thinking that I could, once I was over the border, I could just walk into Ukraine through that border.
Yeah.
Because the other one was not very well policed and it was easy to go in and out.
Right.
And there was a bad decision. I was coming out of this kind of dark area, and suddenly this guy's got a Kalashnikov on me and is shouting at me, and I'm like, whoa, fuck. I'm British, you know, I've got a bulletproof vest on.
That's terrifying.
And everything, so I can understand his disturbance. But he made me go and get back in the vehicle I'd come over in, and then I had to go over in a more legitimate way, effectively. But I got to my friend and his brother. I managed to get him out of Ukraine quite easily, in the sense that nobody stopped me or anything, right? So it was just, I was nothing to do with him in a sense of I wasn't connected to his family in any legitimate way. So it's kind of, what happened then was when I got over the Ukrainian border, the Polish border guards then stopped me and said, okay, Thomas, listen, like, it's a bit of a grey area and you're obviously doing something good. We can see that you're a genuine bloke, but you're still an adult trafficking a minor across a border, and you're seemingly not connected to his family in any way.
Right.
Of course.
So we can't let you leave this station because you could just be trafficking kids in theory, right?
Yeah.
And we hadn't really thought about this, right? In this kind of time of trauma, my friend just said, come and get my little brother out. And I said, no problem, I'm going to come and get him out. And you don't. I don't know why, but we just didn't even think about it. We just thought,
I wouldn't think of that.
No, you wouldn't.
people want to get out, they're going to understand, it's going to be fine. And it was difficult for Max because in that instance, this is when he kind of broke down with me for the first time. And that was really hard for me because all he sees men with guns trying to stop the only man that you trust to keep you safe at this point.
Oh, gosh.
And he feels trapped. And they put us in this kind of crappy room that looked like, it was all bashed up and the door handle was hanging off and this kind of thing, like almost like an interrogation room. And it was like a family suite for people who were supposed to be waiting there for documents and things.
Right.
But it was not a nice place to be, and he wasn't eating and he was crying. And I said, listen, I'm not going to let you go. You're not leaving me. Nothing's going to happen to you. I'm here. No one's going to touch you. I don't care what I have to do. Like, don't worry about it. Just, you're with me and I'm going to keep you safe. And it was just kind of trying to console him, really. Eventually, we managed to get to the point where we got his mother on the phone. We got some courts involved, and there was a judge who was up at the time and this kind of stuff. And after 2 or 3 hours of haggling, we managed to get, this kind of adoption process handled so that I was given legal authority to look after him into Poland, effectively.
Yeah.
But it was kind of a challenging experience in that sense. And afterwards, he was thriving. Once I got him out of there and we would pass the border and that was it. He was able to just let himself go. I mean, it wasn't easy for him not having his mother with him and his family, but at the same time, I got him into a routine of taking him to football, which he'd never been able to do before. We joined a football club and it turns out he's probably quite tasty towards Man United or something like that. He's got some mad skills. So there was something like that he adopted really early on that I was then able to cultivate to keep him engaged. And then a lot of his time with us was about how do we get him more into football. And, I've got some friends who are scouts at Man United who said this guy's got the goods, right? He's 9 years old, but he's got the goods.
Yeah.
So let us try and hook you up with some teams maybe in Poland where he could try and take that to a professional level. So it's interesting that we managed to kind of find that and then cultivate it. And maybe he will be a professional footballer one day.
That would be an amazing ending.
Know. But it certainly made the transition process easier for him because he had something to focus his mind on in a way, I think.
A distraction,
Yeah. Where is he still with you now?
No, so we got to a point where his mother wanted us to take him back.
Oh, right.
So he was with us for around 4 or 5 months.
Okay.
And then we got a call from his mother and she said, I want him back. I can't stand to be without him. I feel it's safer now.
Okay.
There's less bombardments and we know what we're dealing with and it's managed. And it was a difficult situation for me, right? Because he's not my kid. So it's not my business in a way.
Yeah.
To say, you can't have your kid back, right? But at the same time, I just didn't want to let him go. I wasn't comfortable with the fact that it was, as much as she felt safer or whatever, it was still a war zone. And he'd become part of my family. He'd become like my son I was protecting him, and that was what it was about. And he was with my son, and that they were like brothers together, doing loads of stuff together and this kind of thing. And we'd kind of got this fluidity of life. And I didn't have a concept in my mind of when he had to go back. I just was happy for it to be indefinite if that was what was needed.
How did Max feel about going back? So it was a
challenging circumstance to have to let him go back in.
How did Max feel about going back?
I think as a child at that age, you don't fully understand everything that's going on. And I think he found it so difficult being away from his mother that I think that's all he could think about in that moment.
Wow. Okay.
Was getting back to his mother.
Yeah.
And then once he was back in Ukraine, then he started to miss us, and then he started to want to be with us and this kind of thing. I think that's when he was challenged more. But I think all he could latch onto was the thought of just being with his mum.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is not surprising for any 9-year-old.
No, exactly.
You just want to feel like, you can feel there's a certain degree of safety that he can feel with us, but we're still never going to be, still not family, right? There's nothing like giving your mum a cuddle to feel safe,
absolutely.
And so I think that was a massive factor in his going back. And when we took him, he was like excited, it wasn't like a depressing time. It was like a really happy time. But it was really kind of heart-wrenching for me to have to let him go back into a situation that
of course.
is still even volatile today.
Are they safe now? Are they okay?
I don't think anyone's safe over there. The bombardments are still happening. I think we've kind of moved on as a Western society in a lot of ways, and that's part of the problem.
Yes.
How long is Putin going to be allowed to just continue abusing this country without people paying attention? You know what I mean? If you look at the news now, there's a minutiae of what's going on in Ukraine, and everything else is just cracking on back to normal about crappy UK government and how they're running our country into the ground. But there's still a war on.
Yeah,
so it's surreal in a way.
I wanted to ask you, but that was one of my questions I wanted to ask you about. Like, it was at the forefront of the news for maybe 3 or so months.
Yeah.
And now it's just, there's barely anything yet. It's still ongoing. I don't fully understand as a person
why it's been dropped. Yeah.
It really frustrates me so much.
Yeah. I mean, it is what happens, I guess. It's like they want to do things that are going to be noteworthy, and if we can't find any more atrocities and all this kind of thing, or we can't bump up the extremity of what's happening over there, then are people going to be interested in watching our channel versus someone else's channel? And that's what it comes down to ultimately.
Yeah.
But here in Poland, it's still prevalent. It's still every day.
Okay,
while you guys are working and stuff like that, everyone in the UK is working. I'm trying to run a business. And at the same time, I have to think about provision of nuclear medication in case a bomb goes off over there, right? Because we're first to get the nuclear fallout.
Of course.
So all of the schools in Poland are stocked with nuclear medication and stuff like this, so that if a bomb is dropped while my son is at school, for example, all the kids have to take this pill. We all have to take a nuclear pill, this kind of thing.
Oh my God.
Which can kill you in its own right. Right? It's like taking some radiation, but ultimately it may also save your life. So it's very real for me at the moment that administering some medication that my son might need if there's a nuclear fallout might kill him.
Yeah.
Just because it's so poisonous.
Bloody
but
hell.
If there's a nuclear fallout, we'll all die if we don't take that pill, right? So it's really real for us over here. It's not like there's no, you can't really hide from it if you're in Europe.
If you had to predict, how long can you see this carrying on for?
That's
a good question.
Because when is enough enough? Do you know what I mean?
To be honest, I just wish that Putin was dead. Apparently he's got cancer and that kind of thing. And my concern is it will go on until he is dead.
Really? Oh my God.
And then someone maybe with a slightly less erratic mindset might go, okay, it's kind of a little bit futile.
Yeah, hopefully.
What's the point in this? But I honestly don't know. I thought that it would be several months, they'd get beaten up and they'd decide it wasn't worth it. But ultimately you're dealing with kind of a maniacal narcissist who's trying to claw back the remains of the USSR that was lost while he was serving as a special forces agent.
Yeah.
And if that's the last thing he can do before he goes to the grave, then that's what he's going to do. And unfortunately, when you're dealing with someone like that, who hasn't been kept in check over 20 years or however long of abusing this political system, I don't know how you stop it.
Yeah, that's true.
100%. And I mean, I don't know anything about war. I don't understand how he's not been assassinated or something yet. But I've been of the same.
He's got
view.
people that check his food. He's got animals that check his food. All sorts of stuff. I mean, it's really weird.
It's really
I've heard from. I've got some friends who are in the Russian military and stuff, and he's mostly holed up in a bunker.
Wow.
Streets are cleared every time he comes out. He's got a very close-knit group of people around him. And remember, he's had 20 or 30 years or more to orchestrate this system of control that surrounds him right now and protects him right now.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are people in his circle who would like to do it. But already he's trying to change who those people are that are closest to him so that he's manipulating the system that looks after him. So it's kind of like, how do you get to it?
Yeah.
If I had a shot, I'd take it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
On a slightly more positive note, you also did a crowdfunder, and your aim was £1,000, and you raised about 4,300.
That's amazing.
Yeah, which is obviously great. Where is that money gone?
So we were actually helping at the same time as with Max. We were helping out with the local schools because there was also an orphanage from Ukraine. So we got notified that there was a bus of 50 orphans coming in, and then the next week there was another 100 orphans coming in. So it was kids who were from orphanages. This isn't necessarily children who were orphaned by the conflict, but they were trying to evacuate schools. So primarily the money went to support them and to support Max and get him new clothes and all sorts of stuff. Really, there was so much to do at the time.
That's good.
And I think that's the schools are still running. So there are still some of the kids who are still. What they tried to do here was integrate the Ukrainian children into a Polish system of schooling. So we were trying to help with. We've got a school that's kind of 100 to 200 meters from our house, for example, and they can. I think they were servicing 300, 400 kids. So really, the money that we got was kind of a drop in the ocean as to what can we do for them. But with books and bags and coats and all this kind of stuff, it goes a long way if you don't have a family when you come over here.
Absolutely.
And the school system here, to be fair to them, did a really good job. I don't know how we would have managed in the UK. I think school system's a bit weak at the moment as it is. But, at the same time, I think they did a really good job of kind of integrating them and seeking out what they needed, with kind of computers and things like that. So it was quite a systematic process, and I was surprised.
Yeah,
if I'm totally honest. But I feel like it was money well spent, and even spending my own money to do the petrol for going in and out of Ukraine,
I can't even imagine.
This kind of thing is this is why I had to eventually come back. I was like, you just don't have any money anymore. I was like, I have to just go and earn money. It's you can try and do what you can to save people, but ultimately when it comes back to it, as a human being, you have to take a step back and say, okay, at what point am I now leading my life into an extreme detriment?
Yeah, that's
if I've
true.
got to look after my 4-year-old and my wife and these kind of things, and I've got to earn money, how long can that go on for?
Yeah.
And I think if you come back to your earlier question on would you travel from the UK and stuff like that, I think that is the reticence of a lot of people, right?
The money, yeah.
The average person in the UK, we're going through a crisis in the UK at the moment. The average person in the UK has got 1 month's worth of wages in their account as savings. Yeah. And if they're made redundant or something, they're in a pretty sticky situation. So I kind of understand in a way that on a level of preservation, your first thought is how am I going to earn money? I've run my own businesses for 18 years. So for me, I had the ability to go, do you know what? I'm taking some time off to go to Ukraine and do what I feel I have to do at this point.
Yeah.
And I've got a safety net and this kind of thing. but I think that's where a lot of people have been challenged.
Yeah.
So
for
yeah,
sure.
but I appreciate everyone who donated and things like that. You know, I was kind of hoping to raise more and do more and all this kind of thing, and I wanted to adopt more kids and stuff. And you kind of always get, you know, you try and do what you can, but at the same time, we were trying to build part of our property and stuff like that. And you have a certain amount of room and this kind of thing. So,
Exactly.
but I think we did the best we could in a situation that we were in, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. It's admirable, and your whole story is just incredible.
No, it is.
I've got one last question for you. We've got a friend, Sandra. She's been on the podcast before. She lives in Ukraine. We did an interview with her while she was right in the thick of it. She's still there now. She refused to come out because she didn't want to leave the male members of her family behind. And her boyfriend has also been drafted to fight. So she's still in a very tough, sticky situation. I just wondered if you could speak to her, if you had any advice or anything, what would you say to her right now?
I think the Polish are with you. You know, the British military that no one knows about are with you. And there is a lot of support there, and there will continue to be support from surrounding countries. So know that you're not alone, and know that we'll be there.
Yeah.
And just try to stay as resilient as you can.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of friends who are in that similar circumstance, ladies who, you know, work in the rescue industry with dogs and these kind of things. The Ukrainians' top like dog trainers and stuff like that are friends of mine, and they're working in veterinary hospitals to look after, because they weren't willing to leave the country and leave the animals, right?
Yeah.
Where everyone else was fleeing.
Yeah.
So they're bunkered down and in circumstances similar to that. And I absolutely admire the Ukrainian resolve and the Ukrainian women who have stayed behind to do their duty to their country, as I would expect to do if it was my country as well. And I think my wife would if it was Poland, you know.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So just try and stay mentally resilient and know that we're with you and you have support, and this will come to an end.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on, Tom, and sharing your story. We really appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you so much for your time.
No worries at all.
And for continuing to keep the message going, right?
Yeah.
When
Of
so many have
course.
turned a blind eye and have forgotten about the fact that this is still happening every day.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite important
So
to
I
us.
appreciate you guys.
No worries. Thank you so much for coming on again.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hello there, I'm Johnny Depp, and you're listening to the Court Case Podcast.
Well, we hope you enjoyed the conversation today, guys. It was a really interesting one. How did you feel about it?
Yeah, no, honestly, really insightful. And I think people that do stuff like that are so incredible. They need more recognition, but also what needs more recognition, can't get that word out, is the fact that obviously the war is still going on.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
That's crazy that no one's really talking about it anymore.
Yeah, and it's one thing that's also really important is the people that are actually living it right now. So
100%.
if you haven't listened to Sandra's episode, then we will be putting the link in the show notes for you guys to listen to, and so you can hear what the actual experience is like in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And we just hope that you guys have taken some interesting stuff away from today's episode. So thank you all for listening. We'll be back next week with another good episode of something, so please follow us on Instagram.
We don't know yet.
Yeah, we don't know yet, but please follow us on Instagram at Court Case Podcast, and we will see you all next week.